It's interesting how often we just accept things we're told, right? Especially when it touches on faith or, deep beliefs. We hear an official line, sounds final, and we don't always question it. But what happens if we actually push back a bit, if we dig deeper? Sometimes the truth that comes out is, pretty surprising. And that's exactly what we're doing today. We're taking a real deep dive into one of the most, I'd say, hotly debated religious events in the Philippines. We're going to unpack the story of the 1948 Marian apparitions in Lipa, Batangas. This is where Our Lady is said to have appeared as the Mediatrix of All Grace. Now, lots of people, especially Filipino Catholics, tend to dismiss this pretty quickly. Why? Because officially the Vatican hasn't approved it. That's the common line. But our mission here is to explore why that quick dismissal might be built on, let's say shaky ground. We want to look at the complex history, the controversies, things most people don't hear about the official stance. And just a reminder before we jump in, you can find this deep dive, plus a lot more content, over at www.epistles.online.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating, I think, about Lipa is how it really pushes us to think about discernment, about authority, too. And, what does it actually mean to be properly informed, especially when you're dealing with something deeply spiritual? It raises some tough questions, definitely.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. For many people, like we said, the story of Lipa is just case closed, the Vatican said no. End of story.
That's certainly the common perception, yes. The official negative decision goes back to 1951. A commission of Filipino bishops met, and they concluded the apparitions were not of supernatural origin. That's the decree everyone points to.
Right, but this is where it gets really interesting, isn't it? Because the information we've looked at suggests that 1951 decision maybe wasn't really about theological investigation at all. The claim is it was more like a political and coercive maneuver. I mean, think about that. Our source points out this sad irony. You have this incredibly Marian country, so devoted to Mary, yet potentially dismissing a Marian apparition because the ruling was based on, get this, coerced signatures.
And that claim of coercion, it's not just a throwaway line. It's absolutely central. There are multiple testimonies, historical findings popping up over the years, suggesting bishops were pressured. Some accounts even say they were forced to sign that negative ruling. And the threat, not insignificant. We're talking serious canonical penalties, punishments under church law. And another really crucial detail often missed is that the 1951 decision itself was apparently never properly promulgated. Meaning it wasn't officially announced or put into effect for the faithful in the correct way. And incredibly, it was actually kept secret for a time.
Kept secret, a major decision like that.
Exactly. Imagine this significant spiritual event essentially suppressed by a ruling that wasn't even properly or openly communicated.
Okay, I know some listeners might be thinking, hang on, this sounds a bit like conspiracy talk. Anti-clerical maybe. But it's important to stress, this isn't just random speculation. Our sources point to well-documented investigations. We're talking historical documents, first-hand accounts.
Precisely. And there was a truly pivotal piece of evidence that came to light fairly recently, in 2017. Researchers found the personal journal of Father Angel de Blas right there in Rome.
And he was.
He was a Dominican psychologist and, crucially, a key investigator in the original Lipa inquiry way back in 1948. And his journal, discovered all those decades later, apparently strongly affirms that Sister Teresita Castillo, she was the visionary, was sincere and authentic.
Wow. From one of the original investigators. That does change things, doesn't it?
It casts a very different light on the whole initial process, yes. It raises serious questions about the integrity of that 1951 verdict.
And this isn't just about historical debates or, church procedures. There's a real human element here. Think about the pain of the Lipa devotees. People who truly believe, who feel a connection to Our Lady Mediatrix. And because they hold on to that devotion, they often get mocked or dismissed by fellow Catholics. Their faith gets labeled fanaticism. They get spiritually bullied, told they're deceived, or even worse, that it's diabolically misled.
It's incredibly harsh, isn't it? And the source material really emphasizes these are faithful Catholics. Their devotion isn't usually some sudden whim. It's often the fruit of years, even a lifetime, of prayer, discernment, and love.
Yeah. So to just tell them to drop it, especially with all these questions about the original dismissal, it feels, deeply unjust. It causes real spiritual anguish. But then the story takes another twist, a big one. In 2015, Archbishop Ramon Arguelles, who was the Archbishop of Lipa at the time, he issued his own decree. After, as he put it, long years of prayer, study, and discernment. And what did he say?
He declared the 1948 apparitions to be of supernatural origin.
He actually approved it.
Locally.
Yes. He cited Sister Teresita's testimony, the persistence of the devotion among the faithful over decades, and importantly, he pointed to the historical inconsistencies of the Church's prior judgment.
That must have been a huge moment for the devotees. Validation.
Absolutely. But then the Vatican stepped in again.
What happened?
The Vatican reaffirmed the original 1951 negative verdict.
So they overruled Archbishop Arguelles. Effectively, yes. But here's the critical argument from our sources. The Vatican's reaffirmation. It did so entirely on the basis of the same flawed and compromised foundation, that 1951 ruling.
The one based on alleged coercion.
Exactly. So if you follow the logic presented, if that 1951 decision was compromised from the start, maybe lacked true binding authority because of how it was obtained, then Archbishop Arguelles' 2015 declaration, made after careful local study, arguably remains the most credible and authoritative judgment to date on the ground in Lipa.
So from that perspective, supporting the Archbishop's 2015 decree isn't disobedience.
It's framed as an act of fidelity to truth and due theological process. It challenges us to look past the surface rolling to its potentially rotten foundations.
Okay, but things get even more complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because more recently, we've heard conflicting things from other church figures.
That's right, adding another layer entirely.
Some church leaders, even exorcists. I think Father Francisco Sicchia, the chief exorcist of Manila, was mentioned.
Yes, he and reportedly some other exorcists have publicly suggested the Lipa apparitions were false or possibly diabolical in origin.
Which, understandably, adds a lot of confusion for ordinary Catholics trying to make sense of it all. Diabolical? That's a strong word.
It is. And it's important, as our sources suggest, to approach these claims critically. While exorcists play a vital role in spiritual discernment, the argument presented is that they are not infallible, and their specific authority or opinion in this area does not override legitimate theological process, canonical law, or historical documentation.
So their personal discernment doesn't automatically trump the historical evidence or potentially flawed past judgments.
That's the perspective. From this view, such statements seem to contradict not only the truth of Lipa, as presented through the evidence, but also the guidelines laid down by the CBCP, that's the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, and Rome itself, regarding how such investigations should proceed.
It really calls for prudence, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not just accepting one opinion over another without looking at the whole picture.
Prudence and charity, yes. Especially when conclusions seem to bypass significant historical and procedural facts.
Which brings us back to a really important question for you listening. Our sources really emphasize this. Catholics are actually obligated by the Catechism and canon law to form our consciences. That means we have to think, pray, study, and discern the truth. It's not just passive acceptance.
Right. And Canon Law 212 even highlights the sometimes the duty of the faithful to voice concerns, especially about things affecting the good of the Church.
This really gets at the difference between true, informed obedience and what Pope Francis has called clericalism.
Exactly. That unhealthy deference to authority that can sometimes stifle truth, dismiss genuine faith, or ignore the valid concerns of the laity. Our source calls it a potential cancer.
It's a strong analogy. It suggests blind obedience, especially to a decree potentially born from coercion and used against the faithful, isn't virtue.
Indeed. And the source material puts it very directly. To discredit Lipa based on selective spiritual interpretation while ignoring decades of documentary evidence and testimonies is not justice. It continues. It is injustice wrapped in the garb of caution.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It challenges that idea that simply dismissing Lipa is the safe or obedient thing to do. It demands we actually engage with the evidence.
It really asks you to think critically, to investigate for yourself, rather than just accepting the simplest, perhaps most convenient narrative.
And despite all this, the suppression, the back and forth, the push to properly re-examine Lipa hasn't gone away, has it?
Not at all. If anything, the call to revisit the case seems to have grown more urgent and widespread over the decades. People are still deeply invested in seeking clarity.
And there was a recent development just this year.
Yes. In March 2024, the CBCP, the Philippine Bishops' Conference, they announced they would revisit the case.
Okay, revisit. Does that mean reopen the investigation?
Well, that's the key point. They explicitly said they would not reopen it, just revisit it.
Which sounds insufficient.
That's how our sources see it. They view it as welcome but insufficient. The call remains for a full reopening of the investigation, one involving independent theologians, perhaps lay representation, and crucially, full access to all the relevant documents, including those potentially showing coercion or Father de Blas's findings.
That sounds like the only way to really get to the bottom of it and achieve some kind of lasting resolution.
It's argued that's the only path to truly restore trust, bring healing to those affected, and ensure a just outcome after all this time.
It circles back to that provocative thought from our sources, doesn't it? Looking at the unwavering devotion of so many people over 70 years, are they all deceived? Or are they witnessing something that many of us are too afraid or perhaps too blindly obedient to confront?
It's a challenging question.
And it reinforces this core idea. Maybe to question the Lipa verdict is not to disobey the Church. Maybe, in fact, it is to love the Church enough to ask her leaders to correct their errors.
And the source defines real disobedience, not as asking questions, but as refusing to engage with the truth, in dismissing the pain of the oppressed, and in supporting a judgment born of coercion and concealment.
So, as you can probably tell, this is just scratching the surface. This is our first step. We plan to dedicate more deep dives to this story because it's so unique, so complex, and yeah, so controversial. Think about it. The Lipa apparitions might be the only major Marian apparition site in the world that has been officially disapproved, then approved locally, then disapproved again by higher authorities.
It's an unprecedented situation, really. So much to unpack still.
Absolutely. We're just starting to peel back those layers, and we really invite you to discern along with us as we go deeper. So as we finish up this first look, just hold on to that thought about the power of asking questions, of doing your own inquiry, especially in matters of faith. Don't shy away from seeking understanding that goes beyond the easy answers or the official statements sometimes.
Yeah, I think cases like Lipa really do highlight how vital historical integrity and open, honest dialogue are, especially within institutions dealing with something as profound as spiritual experience. It's a reminder for all of us, really, to actively pursue truth, even if that truth makes us uncomfortable or challenges what we thought we knew.
Well said. Remember, everyone, you can find this deep dive, links to source material, articles, and much more on the website, www.epistles.online. And please do subscribe to the blog there and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. That way you won't miss our future deep dives as we continue to explore the unique story of Lipa and other fascinating topics that really make you think. We'll be back soon with more.